Alright, so I think we've had about as much fun as we can have with a single color LED. So let us introduce the Neopixel. So as you can see in the image on the bottom right, this is an array of 8 Neopixels with the wires coming off of it. So let's figure out how we can program that. So first of all, let's start a new sketch. So we're going to press on this button, which creates a new program. Let's modify its name to make more sense. We'll call it Neopixel, like so. And so now, well, what do we do? Since a Neopixel is not really a standard type component, it actually requires a library from the Neopixel company. So let's go down to the libraries. And as you can see here, there are libraries for a lot of different types of parts. So in order to zero in on what we're interested in, let's go type in Neopixel in the search bar. Okay, so it claims there is nothing here. So why don't we go to the library manager, see if we can find something. And as you can see, there are a few components from Adafruit, who's the manufacturer of Neopixel. This is the one we're interested in, so we will click it to make it one of our favorite libraries, and then down here we just say done. So now, in theory, it should include the Neopixel libraries when we compile our code. So let's take a look at the Neopixel examples. If we expand this out, we'll see that there are 4 pieces of sample code. Let's start with simple, since that might seem like the best one to choose. And we see here that they have a bunch of defines and a declaration here, an int declaration, and then the familiar setup and loop starts. So let's look at the stuff that happens before setup. Well, first of all, let's just let's save this out. So I'm going to save it out into our sketchbook. So you can see now it's in our sketchbook. And the reason I did that is because it's easier to copy stuff back and forth between it and our code. So the first thing that we're interested in is this include statement, which includes their library in our code. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in. What else we want to get here? We're interested in the pin 6, we've seen that. That's going to be the output pin as well as the number of pixels. And then we're going to also want this declaration of this pixels, which is of type Adafruit Neopixel. So we'll copy this whole section right here and we'll drop it in right here. So pin 6 is where the wire is going to connect to our board to the input of the Neopixel array. And the numpixels is how many are in the array. Well, if we look at our array, there's only 8 on here. So let's change this from 16 to 8. And then if we look at this, this basically configures this element as type Adafruit Neopixel, which is what we want. So what do we want to put in setup? Well, let's go back to the simple copy. And well, if we look in their setup function, we don't really care about this because this is not our board. All we care about is this command right here, which initializes and clears the Neopixel array. So let's paste that into our code. And then if we look back at the sample code, in this loop, we see these 3 commands that look like they may be useful. So let's copy those and put them in our code. So if you look closer at this function, there's this I here, and what it's supposed to represent is the LED in the array, the number of the LED. So let's start with just 1. So that would be the first LED in the array. And what it'll do is it'll write the red, green, and blue values with 0, 150, and 0, so that means that the red will be off, the blue will be off, but the green will get a value of 150. and they're saying it can be here from 0 up to 255, so that's moderately bright. So let's see if this code will actually compile as is. So without doing the download, let's just do the compile. So let's fix all the problems here. So delay val is not declared in this scope, and we don't have an integer delay val, so let's add that in. It's similar to our time variable that we used in the previous example. So let's go with 1 second. Now let's recompile. So again, we created a variable called delay val and assigned it to 1000. Forgot to put the equal sign in there. And then that's used by this delay function down here. Okay, so that looks good. So now that we have this compiling, we need to hook the board up to our Arduino. So it's always a good idea to unplug your board when you're about to connect something to it. So let's do that right now. And if we look back at this again, we have the red wire, the white wire, and the black wire. Generally black is ground and red is power. And again, we can re-verify that by looking at the back of this. Ground is the black right here. Red is the 5-volt DC, and the DIN is white, so that's the input. So let's hook this up. So we're going to plug the black wire into one of the connectors that says ground, and the red wire into the 5-volt spot, and then we're going to go to 6 for our signal. And so there we have it all. So you can see that right there. We've got ground and 5-volt. It's always good to double check. And then the white wire right there is on 6. All right. So now let's plug this in. And of course, nothing's going to happen because we haven't downloaded the code yet. So let's try that right now. And as you can see, it turned on LED 1 green. So it looks like my assumption that right here, this 1 was the first LED is not correct. They must index from 0. So let's recompile and load it with 0 as the LED that we're going to be driving. This 0 right here, that is. And if you'll notice, once it finishes, this green LED should actually move to that one. So now it turns on and it drives that LED.